Mountain, Island, Lightning Bolt, Spell Pierce, Switchblade, Stab Wound, Red Mage, Blue Mage.
Welcome to Filthy Casuals Review, a game where two bumbling magic morons try to match wits with the best brains Limited has to offer, and Marshall Sutcliffe. Just kidding, love you, Marshall. Here's how it works. When a new Magic set comes out, pro player Luis Scott-Vargas and self-proclaimed food and beverage director Marshall Sutcliffe grade all of the commons and uncommons from the set on their excellent podcast, Limited Resources. Kenny and Seth have each done a blind review of the cards on their own. The goal? Get as close as possible to the grades the pros gave them. I'll let LSV explain the grading system.
A's.
These are your bombs, your game winners, just the best cards in the set. They tend to be really efficient, good in many situations, or just capable of ending a game by themselves.
B's.
B's are cards that actively pull you towards their colors. These are headliners for a set, go-to cards, and reasons to be in a particular color, clan, or guild.
C's.
C's are playable. Most cards fall into this category. They're fairly interchangeable, and you're going to end up with a bunch in your deck. C's don't mean bad. C's are just kind of your average card.
D's.
D's are sometimes playable, but you'd prefer not to run them. These are the cards that, when you've got these in your deck, you kind of wince a little. You're actively unhappy that you have to play them.
F's.
And then F's are basically unplayable.
Seth and Kenny will get points based on how far off they are from the professional grades. It's a lot like golf. There's a lot of cursing and the low score wins. To spice it up, the loser of our little game will have to buy a booster box of the new set for the winner. Stick around till the end of the show to see who won. But for now, let's talk about some of the truly awful decisions Kenny and Seth made, and maybe even some of the valuable lessons learned, as Filthy Casuals Review...
Kaldheim!
Hey. Seth, welcome.
Ken, thank you.
It's Red Mage, Blue Mage. You've been on the show a number of times to play Magic the Gathering. And today we are doing something different, as you all heard in the introduction. This is Filthy Casuals Review. We just want to intro this, since this is the first time that we're doing it, and talk about where the idea came from. For me, it was just, I like Limited Resources as a podcast, and I like Luis Scott-Vargas, and I like Marshall. And my favorite episodes, and I think a lot of people who are fans of the show, love the episodes where we get to review all the new cards and see what LSV and Marshall make of them. I always look forward to those episodes.
I agree. I think both of those all those things are a lot of fun, and it's really cool to get that insight to, especially going into any kind of draft that you're going into, to have a good idea about what you want to actually look for, because you can go in blind on some of these releases, and I've done that before, and for me personally, I typically just stare at the cards blankly, and I can't come up with any sort of plan at that point. So it's really helpful just to have this information here, just to kind of know going into it, okay, let me start thinking about a plan. If I see these cards here, maybe think about this archetype or that archetype. So it's really helpful to have that information.
Yeah, especially going into a brand new format where you don't know the ropes yet. And it makes for great discussions. Sometimes we talk about Felidar Retreat for 5 minutes and come to different conclusions. But I started just in my own head playing along and trying to, after they read the card, guess what grade they're going to give it. And I approached you and said, wouldn't that be a fun podcast? And as we brainstormed it, we're both gamers, of course, and so we're like, what if we turned it into a game? So that's what we've done. So we've graded all the cards, and we are now ready to discuss. Just as a setup for this is not going to be like Limited Resources. This is not a full set review. We are not talking about every card. We are not going to be here for 4 hours.
Correct.
Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to look at interesting cards. Interesting in that maybe we gave it a grade that doesn't match up or is far away from what Luis and Marshall gave it, or you and I gave it very different grades, or just cards that we think are interesting and want to spend some time talking about. So we're not going to go exhaustively through every single card. We're just going to hit the highlights. And with a special interest in one, laughing at ourselves for how wrong we are.
Oh yeah.
And 2, learning something. I want to go through this and see where we went wrong, what lessons we can learn to better evaluate cards. Because I view this as well as just being a lot of fun, as being a way to learn more about how to properly value cards that you're just reading for the first time.
I totally agree. This has definitely been a learning experience for me, just doing this the one time. One thing that I kind of felt, I didn't necessarily have the deck stacked against me per se or anything like that, but my playstyle and LSV's playstyle do not match. I prefer playing more along the lines of someone like Reed Duke, who prefers Jund or a Mardu or something like that, where LSV tends to go for the blue decks and whatnot. But yeah, it's definitely insightful just to try and understand from a perspective of not having, or just being conscious of your biases whenever you're actually looking at these and understanding, is this a good card objectively, or am I applying any subjective values to it?
Right. Now, going into this, before we actually dive into the cards themselves, what was your confidence level entering into this, and how did that pan out, roughly speaking?
Sure. So, talking about confidence, I'm going to go back just a smidge here. I'm going to talk about my method and how I approach this, because I wanted to have some sort of structure to actually doing this. Whenever you first approached me with this, I was all for it. And I'm a data analyst by trade, and I felt that I could apply that to this here. And it's kind of interesting to see how well, having that systemic approach will do that versus my gut feelings and whatnot. So we'll see how that actually goes. So eventually what I did was I took the Zendikar Rising draft data there and applied numerical values to the grades and whatnot. And I just want to see if there's any kind of significance between any kinds of different data sets or whatnot. So I did find a couple, and a lot of these are really basic things that we already really knew, like in the back of our minds and whatnot, but this more or less confirmed it. So I found 3 significant differences between rarities, so commons and uncommons, if the cards had a mechanic versus a non-mechanic, like a set mechanic, and then also a significant difference between if it was multicolor versus monocolor cards. The multicolor cards typically or your build-arounds and whatnot. So those are typically graded just a little bit higher and whatnot. So being able to see that and formulate a plan a little bit actually helped me build more confidence in how I was starting to choose my grades and kind of guess what LSV was going to grade. So I would say my confidence is 80%. I'm pretty confident. I'm feeling pretty good about this one.
Still feeling good.
Oh yeah.
Well, I would say I was fairly confident going in.
Okay.
I would say that has potentially changed significantly having done it.
Yep.
So we can now see each other's grades. However, we can't see the final score. You haven't looked at the final score, right?
I have not, no.
Okay, so we do not know who has won. That will be saved for the end. How exciting. Okay, with that, I think we're ready to dive into some cards. I'm going to go ahead and pick out the first one that I want to discuss, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
We're going to start in white, which is where they started this go-around. The first card I want to talk about is Battlefield Raptor.
Okay.
Which is 1 white mana for a creature bird, a 1/2, and it has flying and first strike. And that's it. I gave this a D, and LSV gave this a C-. So a pretty significant difference there. I put it in the category of you would not be happy to play this, and LSV says this is a perfectly average playable card, nothing wrong with it. And their discussion really hinged on 1-drops. They pointed out this trend over the past few sets where 1-drops are becoming increasingly playable. They used to be just like stone nothing for the longest time, and now they've kind of worked their way up to being fine playables. My thing is, I've seen that trend, and I've heard that trend that they've talked about, but it tends to be like 1-drops that are fine early and then have some activated ability later on. Mm-hmm. This is just a 1/2 flying first strike with no other late game stuff going on. So I think that's why I valued it a little bit lower, but I think I could just be wrong about that the 1-drops just are that much more powerful.
Yeah, I value this one a C minus as well, and I do agree with what you're saying with this one here. One thing I did notice just in Kaldheim in general is that I did feel like the kind of early game weenies, if you will, did have some value later on between mechanics and or any kind of activated abilities or something like that. Whereas this one here, flying first strike, sure, it's kind of whatever. And even just looking at the set list itself, one toughness creatures are really, there's not a whole heck of a lot of them. So this one's really kind of depending on your equipments and auras or enchantments and whatnot to really kind of keep this one relevant. Mid game, even late game, I'd hesitate to say that even with equipment, this one's really going to be that great. I mean, it does have evasion with flying, but yeah, I agree. I this one here more goes towards the data, just to kind of go along with that. So if I were just to rank it myself, I agree with you. I don't think this is one of the stronger ones. And I think maybe that's just a trend of white in general with this one. I know the community at large is really hating on white, more for the card draw and whatnot, but generally a card like this generally just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, I think about this card and comparing it to other commons. Would I rather have one of the other commons, or would I rather have a 1 power flyer for 1? And I feel like I'd rather have the other commons. I don't see this going in my deck, but I think I must just be wrong. And I think part of it, and this will be a theme that will run through a lot of our commentary, I think, this is just a more aggressive format than I'm used to seeing in the past few sets. And so a 1-mana 1/2 flying first strike goes farther in an aggressive set than it would somewhere else.
Sure, I agree.
Okay. What card would you like to talk about next?
Okay, the next one in white that I would like to talk about is Divine Gambit.
Oh, yeah.
So you and I are about on the same page. I gave this an F. I hate this card.
Let's go ahead and read it for the audience.
So Divine Gambit is a sorcery for white. Exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment an opponent controls. That player may put a permanent card from their hand onto the battlefield. And I hate that. You
gave it an F. I gave it a D. LSV gave it a C.
Yeah. To me, you truly have to be desperate to play a one-sided show and tell. That's essentially what this is. I guess in maybe a later part of the game, you could play this whenever they don't have a hand left, but I really didn't see much discard effects or anything like that, so I just think this is such a dangerous card to actually be playing. I understand that, yeah, there might be something scary on the board right now, but if you're staring down a mythic in hand or something like that on turn 4 or something like that, say it's a Vorinclex or something like that, and you get that down on turn 4, you cheat it for them, that's bad news. I really don't like it. Yeah.
So to touch on their conversation they had about it, one, you're absolutely right. They basically said, you just can't cast this turns 2 through 5.
Yeah.
It's just stone uncastable. Because of that disaster scenario. That's all too easy. Or heck, I mean, even if you cast white, remove their 3-drop and they put a 5-drop into play, that's a disaster. You've just given them a bunch of free mana, basically.
Yep.
So you just can't do that. But his point about where this is good is, as you said, later in the game. It's good in a late control deck when you've run them out of cards. And the other two things he said, which I did not think about at all, one is that this pairs really nicely with other removal. As in, you run them out of other creatures, they keep having to drop threats, and then this is the last one on top.
Sure.
And there's the theme in the set, particularly in white, of getting benefits for casting 2 spells a turn. And this is cheap enough removal that you could, on turn 6 or 7, cast this and cast a pretty big threat.
Okay.
These are things I didn't really think about. I'm still curious how often you're really going to run this, especially given that there's plenty of perfectly good removal as well.
Yeah, that's one thing I actually saw was I was really impressed with the removal just in general with this set. I thought it was good to the point where I hated this card. I can understand, like, this is an emergency hatch and whatnot, and every point that you just mentioned that LSV and Marshall made are very good points, but yeah, I just think there's enough other stuff here that this is just really dangerous to be able to play this card.
Yeah, I don't know. This is one that I would have to see work effectively before I'm like... And to be fair, the grade they gave it was C. They're not like over the moon about it. They're like, it's a perfectly average, fine card. But C means you're never unhappy to have it in your deck. And I just think there are plenty of situations where you will be unhappy to have it in your deck.
Yeah, I know I wouldn't want it. But hey, that's why I'm not a pro.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so next card I want to talk about... let's go to Kaya's Onslaught. Now, this is actually something interesting in general that will come up a few different times over the course of the set. Combat tricks in the set. Mm-hmm. So Kaya's Onslaught is 2 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains double strike until end of turn, which is not very good. But it has Foretell. Foretell means you can pay 2 and exile it face down. And then later, you get to cast it for its Foretell cost, which varies. This one is 1 white. So you pay 2 at some point, and then later you get white, +1/+1, and double strike for a creature. Mm-hmm. In general, Marshall and LSV don't like combat tricks. It's got to be like amazing before they start to like it. I gave it a C+, you gave it a C, and they gave it a B-, which is like front runner for the set. Draws you actively into the color territory. Mm-hmm. It is interesting too, because we have a series of rules for how we assign the grades from the pros. We go by LSV first and foremost, and so he gave it a B-. Interestingly, Marshall did give it a C+, and he said he had a great line. LSV gave it the B-, he gave it the C+, and Marshall says, "Well, there's your first wrong grade," with a chuckle. So I wonder how that's going to pan out. And Marshall's logic was just, it's still a combat trick. Like, combat tricks are inherently dangerous. You cast them on your creature, and if it gets killed out from under you, you just got blown out.
Yeah, I agree. And, just overall, I'm really impressed. I have not played it yet, but I really like the Foretell mechanic. I think it's great, and I think it's, just based on the set, I think they've really... open this one up to be a really strong mechanic for limited. So yes, the Foretell costs, you pay 2 earlier and then it just costs 1. So maybe for that turn it's kind of minimal. And then also, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Divine Gambit there, of having multiple spells cast in the same turn. So This one here to me it's kind of an upside play. Like, you cast it for 1, assuming you've paid the Foretell cost. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, so let's assume that there. So you've paid 1, and now you've created a 2/2 creature that gets +1/+1 and double strike. So now, if they did not block, now you've attacked for 6. You've got your first spell that you've only paid 1 on. Let's just say we're on turn 4. Now you've got 3 mana you could possibly cast something else with.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of upside with this one. I had a lot of trouble with this one, and I left this one just based on kind of my method on this one. So I'm trying to trust the process here. But I could see this one going either way. It is a combat trick at the end of the day. I do understand that, but I really like the upside of this one.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at combat tricks, I think what's your best case scenario? And this one does have a really good best case.
I agree.
You were pointing out you put it on the 1/1 or whatever. Well, let's say you attack with a few creatures and one of your 3/3s gets through, and you throw this on top and you've done 8 damage. Like, that can just kill people out of nowhere.
Oh,
which
absolutely.
is not part of what I was thinking about this card. So as far as a combat tricks, this is kind of as good as it gets. It's cheap, it's flexible, it lets you win every combat, and it can even just blow them out. Mm-hmm. This fucking garage, dude. Okay, and then the last card to discuss in white for me is Rune of Sustenance. And this will kind of be a stand-in for the runes in general, I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
because there's one in every color, and I'll read Rune of Sustenance. One in a white for an enchantment, an aura rune. It enchants a permanent. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. As long as the enchanted permanent is a creature, it has lifelink. As long as the enchanted permanent is an equipment, it has equipped creature has lifelink. Now, I gave this a C+. You gave it a C. LSV gave it a B-. So again, we're like a letter grade off, essentially. And importantly, we're in different grade categories. We said this is like average playable Pawn of Limited, and LSV says it's actually just good. And that's kind of across the board for me for most of these runes. Would you say it was the same for you?
Yeah, I totally agree. And having not listened to the podcast yet, is it because of the card draw? Because it replaces itself? Is that why?
It's multiple things.
Okay.
It's multiple things. I'll tell you my logic for putting it in the C category, rather than putting it higher up. In every set, there are some cards that cantrip that are always fine to put in your deck because they cantrip, but the benefit they give you is so slight that they just generally don't make your deck, or don't make your deck as often as you would think. So they wind up falling down a little bit. And this fell into that category for me. Sure, it's 2 mana, it replaces itself, but at the end of the day, putting lifelink on a creature just doesn't sound that impressive to me. But there were things that they said that I just were not on my radar. Like, I think I just completely missed the boat on the runes. I missed the fact that, one, as you said, they cycle. And I think that's important. One thing that Marshall pointed out is that because these just say enchant permanent, you can always just throw them on a land if you were just missing a land drop. So it's like all of these runes have, pay to cycle, which is good. That's like a good worst case scenario. And the other thing they said is you almost always, if you can help it, you want to put this on an equipment. Because that way that stat boost that you're getting will pretty much always be on the battlefield. Whereas you put it on a creature and the creature dies, you just lose it.
Correct.
So this one was one of the first cards where I missed the boat on the grade, and it really impressed on me how good Luis and Marshall are at projecting themselves into gameplay and seeing patterns of play that are just completely fly over my head.
I'm
really bad at imagining the interactions and the scenarios that these cards will be used for. So I almost always just go on like just raw power level, and I miss some of this stuff.
Yeah, same here. As you're talking, I'm now thinking about some of the tap lands that, like, this is outside of Limited, but in Modern or something like that, if you could put this on a Celestial Colonnade, wow. Like, adding lifelink on top of it, something like that. You were talking about the lands and whatnot, or it really just opens up a lot of opportunities that I didn't really think about. Like, I read that, yeah, I can go into a permanent, but why would you do that? I was thinking, let's just throw it on a equipment.
I just assumed they formatted it that way so it can hit a creature or an equipment without being so wordy, which I'm sure they did, but it gives you this extra upside that I just completely missed.
Sure. Yeah. No, that is very interesting. I didn't think about that part either. So, yeah, with this knowledge in mind, I would definitely bump up my grade. I had a C. I still, I won't just say, I'll just match LSV with the B-, but I'd strongly consider probably the C+ and maybe even consider the B- at that point. So yeah. I still probably would land on C+, honestly, even though like knowing the fact that he's a B-. But I would like to see more data on that and just see how that actually plays out, because that really does have a lot of good potential. I do like the runes overall. I think that runes are a cool new aspect that I hope Wizards explores more.
Yeah, they're better than I thought. And it was weird looking over the set just because there are so few cards that give a shit about runes at all.
Yeah.
And that was part of my reason too. Like, I looked at it, I was like, ooh, new subtype or a rune. And then I just did a gatherer search for things that cared about runes, and there's like one card that cares about runes. And I was like, what? I don't understand this. But it's just better than it looks. And maybe there were previously more cards that cared about runes, and they're just like, well, these are just it's too good. And maybe that's another indicator that they're better than you think.
Agreed. Yeah, I think we'll see a lot more of these as this new sets come out and these will start working together. So this could have been just a test for them to kind of just get it out there, see how it plays, and let's get some more data to see if how successful this is. So I definitely feel we're going to see a lot more of these when we start going to future sets.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we go to blue?
Let us, yeah. What is your first blue card?
All right, the first one that I would like to talk about is Avalanche Collar.
Ooh, okay.
Avalanche Collar is 1 and a blue for a snow creature, a human wizard. It's uncommon. It's a 1/3. You pay 2. Target snow land you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature with hexproof and haste until end of turn. It's still a land. So typically, I was looking at the data overall. I took just real quick numbers just to see kind of what our averages were. I took our letter grades, turned them into numbers, and just wanted to see real quick, like, who was the pessimist, who was the optimist, who had the highest average score, who had the lowest. I was the pessimist, you were the optimist, and LSV's wide range encompassed both of us. That was the funny part of it. So
it makes sense. I think he's going to be more nuanced and less tilted one way or another.
I agree. So with that being said, this is one of my very few
over optimistic.
Yeah, and I would still pound the drum for this one to be in the A category.
Okay, yeah. Just to be clear, Seth gave it an A-, LSV, and I gave it a B.
Yes.
And specifically, you gave it a build around.
I gave it a build around.
And so did LSV, build around B.
Yeah. And the reason for that is simply because it's a snow.
Yeah, of course.
It works with snow lands and
you have to draft snow lands or this doesn't do anything,
do.
Really.
So hence the build around portion of it.
Sure.
But these are just mini celestial colonnades, and to me, and that's probably my bias going in to say, like, in control decks, that's essentially your finisher. And if you can make multiple ones every turn, to me that clock is so quick. And I think for a card like this, this is just a decimating card if you can keep it on. I bet, again, not hearing the podcast, I bet that was the sticking point, was that there was enough removal that this thing could get destroyed very easily, just being at 3 toughness. But if this thing's on the board, you better watch out. Like, this is a great card, and I love this one.
Yeah, I think that is part of it, is that it can be removed. I think the other part, and again, this will be a running theme through our discussion about the set, snow is harder to pull off than you think it is.
I imagine so.
That was something that I did not realize when I was reviewing the cards, that they really stressed, is that it's going to be harder for you to be a focused snow deck than you think.
I believe that. That thought never really crossed my mind, but it does not surprise me.
Yeah. Because you have to, one thing to keep in mind, and I looked this up before I started because I didn't realize, or I didn't know which way it worked. When you draft, you get unlimited basic lands. You do not get unlimited basic snow lands.
Correct.
You have to draft those. You have to draft your snow lands.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to, that's why it's build around. But I think that it got knocked a little bit in their mind because you have to really build around it, and that's not easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair.
All right, cool. Next one for me. I want to talk about my first truly horrible grade. And it is also a snow build around. It is Frostpeak Yeti, which is 3 and a blue for a snow creature Yeti, a 3/3. And for 1 and a snow mana, it can't be blocked this turn. Now, they mentioned this. I gave it a B-. You gave it a C. They gave it a D. They said you're not happy to play this. You will be annoyed to have to play this card. Now,
just a side note, yeah. I'm in your camp. I love this card. I don't think it's a B worthy per se or anything like that. I don't think it's going to be something I'm super excited about, but I'm definitely not cutting it. And to me, that's why I gave that more the C category.
Yeah, a 4-mana 3/3 with some potential upside to me doesn't feel like you'll be embarrassed to play this kind of card.
No.
And my thinking on it, and they do mention this. in their discussion. They're like, if this didn't have snow in the cost, so if it was 4 mana for a 3/3 and it just costs 2 and it's unblockable, that would be like a windmill slam. Like that would be really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like just having a constant 3/3 unblockable would be really good for just 2 mana to activate. This falls, I think, into the exact same category as why the grade on Avalanche Collar came down a little bit, is that snow is going to be harder than you think it is to get.
Yeah.
But to me, that would still, okay, it's harder to get than you think. This is still good in that deck, I would think. But one thing that LSV noted and why they actually bumped it down is this is good in stalled boards. This is good when the board is completely cluttered, nobody's attacking or getting through, and then you can start swinging with the Frostpeak Yeti. And his point is, does that really happen in modern day limited? Not really. Boards are getting cleared,
fair.
Creatures are dying, the removal's good. So maybe this doesn't have a home. Anyway,
That's so sad too.
I got fucked on this grade. I got destroyed on this grade. And do you mind if I just go ahead and talk about the next card as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because the theme here is I got fucked on this next one too. Exactly the same for me. I gave it a B-. They gave it a D. This is Frostpire Arcanist. 4 and a blue. Creature. Giant Wizard. It's a 2/5. Costs 1 less to cast if you have a Giant or Wizard. So if you build around it and you have Giants or Wizards, then this is a 4 mana 2/5. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for an instant or sorcery with the same name as a card in your graveyard. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. I gave it a build around B- because a 4 mana 2/5 that draws you a spell is pretty good, I think. And in this case, I think it's just too hard to do. But I'm confused on this grade. I gave it a build around B-, and LSV said, I have the quote written down here. He says there will be some decks where this card is awesome. And to me, it's like, well, that's a build around B. You know, if there are some decks where it's really good, that's what build around means. But maybe his point is that it's so narrow. Like, it's not like, oh, it's build around, you need to include some snow cards, let's say. This is build around where you need Giants and Wizards, and you need multiple copies of multiple different spells, and then it's good. And maybe that's just so hard that it's not even worth really going for.
Yeah, when I looked at this one, I gave it a C+, and I again would lean towards your camp with this one, as far as the thought process. If I were drafting this, if I'm thinking about when I'm drafting this, am I drafting, if pack 1, pick 3, 4, and this shows up, I'm not cutting to it. I would not say, oh, here's Frostpire Arcanist.
Right.
I'm picking this up and I'm changing any strategy that I may have.
Right.
I'm definitely not doing that. What I'm more likely to do is pack 3, pick 2 to 5 regions, something like that. And if I'm thinking, well, okay, I've got a mass of Giants and or Wizards, and I've got some pretty sweet spells. Yeah, I'm going to pick this one up. I think that's more where I would be with that one. To me, that's not a D. A D is like, crap, this is like, pack X, pick 14, 15. It's like, I'm not playing this. Like, I don't think you would, like, especially, there are times where, yes, that is the case. Where it's like, I'm not playing this because I just don't satisfy any of these requirements to make this work for me. And I understand that. That's fine. But when you build around, like you had mentioned on that one, and you gave us the build around designation, yeah, this is good. I totally agree with you on that one.
Yeah, just interesting. I think there are things that figure into the grades that don't make it into their descriptors, and I think how narrow it is, how hard is it to build around, is something that figures in very highly, which is smart. Yeah. I think that matters a lot. Okay, got a few more blue cards that I want to talk about. I want to touch on, well, I was going to say I'm going to touch on this real briefly, but I bet I have more to say than I think. Giant's Amulet, which is our next equipment. This is a different cycle. There's a colored equipment, one for each color, and they have this thing where you can basically kick them, and if you do, they come attached to a creature token that you make, which is cool. It's flexibility. So this is Giant's Amulet, 1 blue, an artifact equipment. When it ETBs, you can pay 3 and a blue. If you do, you get a 4/4 blue giant wizard creature token, and you attach the amulet to it. What does the amulet do? It gives the creature +0/+1 and hexproof as long as the creature is untapped. And it has an equip cost of 2. Now, I gave this a C. You gave it a C+. They gave it a straight B.
I think it's ambitious.
The note I took is that this is the grade I disagree with the most so far. And
yeah, that's fair.
My thinking is this. Look at the equipment by itself. Forget the kicker. 1 mana, 2 to equip, +0/+1, and hexproof, which is okay, I guess, but only when it's untapped. So when you attack with it, you're open to removal. Yep. So it kind of defeats the point of having the hexproof. And now you have a kicker of 4, so you just wouldn't play it by itself. I think that's pretty non-controversial. You would not play this equipment if it was just the equipment.
Agreed.
If you kick it, what you get is a 5 mana 4/5, which is okay. It's not good. And it has hexproof as long as it's untapped. Which, again, that's not very impressive to me.
It's not impressive to me. It's just kind of a dummy thick dude and that is just there for 5 mana. And in this format, just in general, I don't think that really makes the cut all that well.
No. And
not at that price.
Yeah, this leaves behind an equipment that you can then move to something else, but the equipment, again, is really unimpressive to me.
Yeah, I'm not paying 2 to equip this something else unless I am just flooded.
I mean, you'll do it if you have nothing else to do, but the cost of having this instead of like would I rather have this or a 4 mana 4/4? I kind of like the 4 mana 4/4 better.
I agree.
So, and that's not a good card. 4 mana 4/4 is not a good card. And maybe someone's listening to this and be like, "Wow, you are a moron." And that, you know what? Maybe I am. I could definitely be a moron in this case. But this just doesn't seem that the equipment is the big sticking point for me. That just doesn't seem that good. But again, very willing to be proven wrong. One thing I want to say here is that just as a brief interlude, I think I'm going to play this format, especially having done this grading process.
Yeah.
It's almost just for science, but I think this is going to be fun to actually play the cards. And when I get my ass beat by a Giant's Amulet, I will repent,
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm pretty excited about this set. This has been one of my favorite sets here as of recent. So I'm really excited to be able to try this one.
Yep. Okay, what else do I want? Oh, we got to talk about this card. Saw it coming.
Yes.
So we were both way off on this one.
We were.
I gave it a C. You gave it a B-. LSV gave it a D+. We cut.
Apparently I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, so we were way off on this one. This is 1 blue instant counter target spell. So it's just cancel, which is, not very good and limited.
Sure.
But has foretell 1 and a blue. So you can pay 2 at some point, and then later you have counterspell, just straight up counterspell. Actually, a little bit better because one of them is colorless. And I think that's why we graded it that highly, right? It's like,
for me it was, yeah.
What would you grade just straight up counterspell in a modern limited environment? I'd put it up there.
Yeah, probably A-.
And so the fact that it got a D+, they say you will not want to play this card. I was quite puzzled.
I'm floored. Yeah.
The lesson I learned here is that any counterspell that is worse than Mana Leak is going to get a D in the world of limited resources in general, I think. And this is not as good as Mana Leak. Would you agree with that?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. Because Mana Leak is basically 2 mana counterspell, especially in limited environments.
Correct.
And this, you got to pay more mana. It's a little bit more setup. So I think that they will just give any counterspell a D, unless it's Mana Leak or better, which we're not going to see that,
Agreed. Yeah,
I still, the note I have here, I say that, I admit all of that, but I still can't help but think about how often blue decks will pass with nothing to do on turn 2. or any future turn where you've got a couple extra mana lying around, and setting up just a straight 2-mana counterspell seems just really good.
Yeah, I agree. That's just something. I guess I would have to see that in play before I could say one way or another. I would love to be proven wrong.
I was going to say, I guess I would need to play it and feel like it's really anemic, or have it played against me and feel like, wow, that's kind of pathetic. Maybe it's just like everyone else is so quick and are doing more things that you just don't have the time to be messing around setting up a solid coming. But yeah, this was a big head scratcher and a good lesson, I think, as well.
I agree. And this, to me, again, going back to my method, this is an uncommon, and it also had a mechanic ability. So, in addition to just being able to just straight up counter a spell, I was like, oh, this is a slam dunk. And, this is a learning opportunity for me to understand. And I was like, well, not necessarily. Let's really look at the whole grand scheme of things.
Right. Like you said, the thing with like LSV where he's neither an optimist nor a pessimist, and that he's very context dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go into black. Tell me about your first black card you want to talk about. Okay,
from black, let's start with this, and I'm going to pronounce this. English is hard for me. Draugr Recruiter.
I think you did just fine.
Okay.
So what does Draugr Recruiter do?
Draugr Recruiter is a zombie cleric creature for 3 and a black. It's 3 power, 3 toughness, and it has boast, 3 black. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And with this one here, I gave this one a C-, and you gave this a C+.
I did.
And LSV gave this one a D.
Yeah, this is going to sit in your sideboard most of the time, according to LSV.
Yeah, and I could probably be swayed one way or another on this one here. I don't see this one as a sideboard card necessarily. Like, I see this one, again, this is kind of going back to if, maybe the board is kind of at a stalemate a little bit, and maybe this is the reason why it did get that D rating, but there was a lot of enter the battlefield effects that, from what I remember, in this set. So I don't think this is nothing. I guess it kind of depends on what your opinion is on the boast mechanic. I'm not too terribly high on boast, especially,
And for the listener, boast means that when you attack with the creature, afterwards at any point you can pay the boast cost and you get whatever the effect is.
Correct. Yes. So boast for me is kind of a mixed bag. There are some boast cards that, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, I apologize, but there's some that I'm like, yeah, okay, this has relevance, I think is going to be mediocre to good, which I would put in Draugr Recruiter in that camp. There's some other ones that, yeah, it's just going to crash into, it's so small that it's going to crash into something else, and you're really only going to get that one time. But being a 3/3, I think it has the opportunity to be able to live through something. So that was kind of my litmus test.
Or it could trade off, and then you pay the boast, and you get a different creature back into your hand, and now you're up a card.
Exactly. So I think this one has some merits, and I don't think it's necessarily a sideboard card or a card you're not excited to play. So for me, I still stand by my C-. If you want to talk about your C+, why you felt that was the grade you gave.
It got up to C+ for me because it just reminds me so clearly of Gravedigger, which is just a great limited card. Maybe I'll read that as well. Yeah, so Gravedigger is 3 and a black, same cost for a 2/2 zombie. When it ETBs, you return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, which we last saw on Amonkhet. Oh no, sorry. We last saw on M20.
Correct, yes.
A fine card. A good card, actually. This is a Gravedigger is a card you actively want and are excited about. I think I would put it in like the B category. This is obviously worse because it is mana intensive to get the actual trigger, which is why for me it got bumped down into the C category. But this was an interesting one for me because on the one hand, when you're looking at a new card, it's very sensical to compare it to other cards that are similar to it that you know from the past and see how they compare. That's very useful, but by the same token, it can be a little bit blinding. I think I let how good Gravedigger is kind of blind me to the real costs that this card has.
Sure.
So you're paying 4 mana for a 3/3, so it's behind on the curve already. Might just get outclassed by their stuff. And then you have to pay that full mana cost again to get a card back to your hand. I think it's pretty far removed from what makes Gravedigger so good, which is that instant guarantee card that you get back in your hand. So
yeah, I agree with that.
So I think they're probably right. I think there is upside, and there are places you would play this, but I think ultimately they are right, and you're probably gonna leave this one on the bench a fair amount of the time, even if it does have its applications.
Sure.
Which is, it's a D.
Sure, that's fair.
Okay, I do want to talk about this one. I was going to skip it because it's another equipment. I have the same thing to say, but I don't. I have a different thing to say. Okay. Let us talk about Draugr's Helm.
Okay.
So this is 1 into black, artifact equipment. This is one that makes a token with a kicker. So when it ETBs, you can kick it for 2 into black. If you do, you get a 2/2 black zombie berserker, and you attach it to it. The equipped creature has +2/+2 and menace, meaning it can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, and the equip cost is 4. So for 5 mana, you're getting a 4/4 menace. Now,
okay.
I graded this pretty accurately. I gave this a B-. LSV gave it a B. He just says it's great. This pulls you into the colors. You gave a C+ to it. The reason I want to bring it up, A, brag on myself. I got the grade right pretty much on this one. But more importantly to me, I think it is wild that LSV gives this equipment and the Giant's Amulet the exact same grade.
Yeah.
So they both, if you kick them, they both cost 5 mana. The blue one gives you a 4/5 kind of hexproof, not really,
sure,
guy. This gives you a 4/4 menace, so it's got evasion. And the equipment it leaves behind grants +2/+2 and menace, as opposed to +0/+1 and kind of not really hexproof. Now the equip cost is 4, so that is definitely a much heftier cost. But
sure.
At least I will pay that cost in the late game. Giving my biggest creature, or even a smaller creature, to split my resources +2/+2 and menace sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Now I'm not griping about the grade. I think LSV is right that this is a B. But if this is a B, I don't get how the Giant's Amulet, is a B too.
I agree. Yep, totally on board with that.
Again, everything, dear listener, everything comes with a caveat that we've very well may have no clue what we're talking about. And if you want to let us know why we don't have any clue, I'm sure you will. We invite this. We invite the discussion.
Full disclosure, I said Hogak was bad. So, if that gives you any kind of idea how much I know about the game of Magic, just remember that for future. Just, if you ever disagree with me, just remember, he didn't like Hogak. So, I thought he needed Trample to be good.
that is a gracious admission that you just made.
Hey, I gotta, if I ever start getting a big head, somebody's got to remember that and just comment that and be like, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Just knock me down a peg or two.
Oh, man. Do you have any other black cards you want to talk about?
One that I just want to touch on, and
please.
we can, 30 seconds at most.
Okay, cool.
I love this card. I think everybody just in general likes this card. I love it even more than everybody else. Feed the Serpent. Feed the Serpent is 2 black for an instant. And it's exile target creature planeswalker. And to me, I gave this an A-. I love this. I think this is unconditional removal. It just checks all the boxes. This reminds me of Vraska's Contempt.
It's instant speed.
Instant speed. Oh man, Vraska's Contempt was a rare, and the only thing it's really doing that this is not was giving you 2 life. That's nothing. I don't care about that.
Sure.
And this is a common.
Yeah.
This is insane. I love this card. So I gave this an A-, thinking, well, I was kind of hedging my bet on this one. I was like, commons typically don't get the A, the coveted A status. I'm kind of hedging my bets on this one. Turns out I went a little too far, but that's okay.
They gave it a B.
I still love this one. Yeah, and B still respectable, especially for a common. You really don't see that many commons get a B.
I'm glad you brought this one up. I did not mark this one to discuss, but that's because I hadn't seen your grades yet. We were quite wide apart on this one. With you giving it A-, I gave it a C+, and right in the middle, LSV gave it a B, which is probably right.
Sure, yeah.
I think this is just very, like you said, let's keep it short. I think you overvalued it, I undervalued it, and the truth is somewhere in the middle.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
Last one for Black. Return Upon the Tide.
Mm-hmm.
This is another big goof for me. So this is Return Upon the Tide, 4 and a black sorcery. Return a target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it's an elf, create 2 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. And it has Foretell for 3 and a black. Now, you gave this a C+.
Mm-hmm.
I gave it a B, a build around B, but a B nonetheless.
Sure.
And LSV gave it a D. I said this is a build around awesome card, and he said you will cry if you have to put this in your deck. The note I wrote myself is I honestly couldn't tell you what I was smoking here. But I do have a follow-up thought. Again, this might be a theme as we talk more about the rest of the cards. I think this card lies to you. And when I'm looking through the set and grading them, I'm like, wow. So you foretell, and for 4 mana, you get a Zombify plus 2 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is a sick elf payoff. Like,
oh, sure.
Like a little 2 or even 3 for 1 kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is, the elves kind of blow. Like the elves, there aren't a ton of elves, and they're all kind of poo-poo.
Yeah.
They're all a little stinky. So this ultimately just doesn't do anything. And I think this is, partially my fault, because I need to take the time to look more carefully at what is the support for this, if it's a build around. But 2, it's a little bit on Wizards, because I think this is just such a bait. Like, this is like it screams build around, right? Like, put me in an elf deck, and you'll be in good shape. And instead, even if you have an elf deck, this is just not very good.
Yeah, that's fair. You really have to, and that's why I really enjoy limited resources and their set reviews and whatnot, to be able to kind of discern a lot of this stuff. Because, again, if I were just going in blind and looking at this, I'd be picking it up, thinking, okay, let's try and wait for an elf. Not wait for an elf, but let's try and pick up some elves and focus on that.
Yeah, this is telling me build some elves.
Yeah, and you're gonna
stinky.
You're gonna get psyched out. Yeah,
not good. Yeah. Okay, that's Black. Let us go on to Red.
So Red, I felt like, just in general, this is the one I really missed on. I just felt like, just looking at the grades, and again, I don't really know the grades yet, the final grades yet. But man, I just feel like I really missed compared to LSV on this one. So, again, we'll just talk about the highlights. For me, the biggest swing and a miss that I had was Dual Strike.
What, the biggest swing and a miss we both had?
Yeah, that was a big poo poo right there.
Big chode.
Yeah,
that was not good.
So Dual Strike is an instant. Costs red, it's uncommon. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell with converted mana costs 4 or less this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. And it has Foretell red. So essentially, like, it definitely encourages the Foretell mechanic. So when I graded this as it's been foretold, and I'm going to cast it for red.
Sure.
I gave this a B-. You gave this a B-.
I did.
LSV gave this an F.
Yes.
He is not playing this card at all.
Yes.
And that floored me.
That's the stone unplayable category. Never put this in your deck.
That just floors me. Because...
yeah.
And, looking back, I was actually trying to do a little research on this one. This reminds me of Twin Cast.
Totally.
So, just real quick, Twin Cast is, for blue, copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Really strikes me as very similar cards, kind of jumping the color pie wheel. that's fine. I have nothing against that one bit or anything. So I'm thinking, red has a lot of damage spells and whatnot. So there wasn't a lot of
burn.
Yeah, a lot of burn, and not necessarily burn to the face or anything like that, which I thought that one just kind of stuck with me. I really didn't see a lot of just to any target, just burn to any target. I saw a lot of very specific, like to creature, to planeswalker. I saw a lot of that, which is fine. That still clears the board.
Sure.
Allows you to attack, kind of safely and unscathed and whatnot. So to be able to copy something, or there was another card that did and hopefully you can think of this one here. There was a card that did 2 damage to each creature, and it exiled instead of destroyed if they died for that.
Yes, that was Crush the Weak.
Okay, so this really strikes me as a usable card with Crush the Weak. So Crush the Weak is, let me look at this one up.
I'll go ahead and read it. I've got it pulled up.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about what Crush the Weak is.
2 and a red, sorcery, deals 2 damage to each creature, and as you said, it exiles them if they die, but it has a foretell cost of red.
Okay, so let's talk about both of those, especially foretell. And, maybe I'm overvaluing foretell at this point, and I will concede that. I need to play that one. I'm really high on foretell. I've mentioned that before, but, to me, if both of these are foretelled, for 2 red, you do 4 damage to each creature, and wipes the board out, and 4 damage is nothing to scoff at. If you have some big fatties already out that can live through that, well, that's strong. That's really strong. So
yeah, and I was thinking at it with even more of like a lizard caveman brain. I was just like, put this in your red-black all removal deck, and this is just 1 mana removal on some turn.
Exactly. You
cast that 4 mana Feed the Serpent, tack a red onto it, and you kill 2 creatures for 5 mana. That's great.
Or, creature planeswalker, 2 planeswalkers. It's great. It's fantastic.
I could totally see that this is not the B that we think it is, and maybe it's a C because it takes some setup.
That's fair.
And it goes into a specific deck. I really have to. I don't see the world that this is an F. I agree. You can't throw this in any deck. I agree.
Agreed.
We both should have put build around on this because
that's fair.
Obviously you need a decent concentration of instants and sorceries because this copies instants and sorceries.
Correct.
But to call this like stone unplayable, like to put this in the same category as like a 1 with nothing, 1 black, discard your hand, it seems like a crime.
It really does.
The note I made here, and I made this note many a time, I will repeat this a few times, is that LSV and Marshall are very fast and loose with how they give Ds and Fs. Like, the point they want to make is this isn't that good of a card.
Sure.
But so they slap an F on it. But that's not what F means by their own definitions. I'm not blaming them, by the way. And I'll probably repeat this same message a couple times. On their show, LSV and Marshall are not optimizing for this stupid little game show that you and I are playing right now.
Yep.
They are optimizing for helping their listeners be good at valuing the cards in a set. And slapping an F on Dual Strike for them is a way to say, look, you probably don't want to be messing with this card too much. Is it more nuanced than that? Yes, but they don't really have to sweat it or worry about it.
That's fair.
But then you and I are playing this game and we both get hosed. But in this case, we both got hosed equally. So
exactly. And this is 1 card out of almost 200 cards. So it's not going to hurt us horribly in the long run. It's just one of those. It's a matter of pride at this point.
This was on my list as well that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. All right. What card would you like to talk about in red?
I want to talk about one that I learned something on, and I think I misvalued, and it looks like you did too. Cinderheart Giant. We both gave the same grade to this card, C+. LSV gave it a D. What does it do? It is 5 red for a 7/6 trample, which in my book is already looking pretty good.
Yeah, it's a great start.
Like, the body is perfectly acceptable for 7 mana. Throw trample on this big beefcake, and it's like, oh, okay.
Oh, he's dummy pick, yeah.
And when it dies, it does 7 damage to a creature an opponent controls at random. which just means effectively it kills one of their creatures at random when it dies.
Yeah.
So this is a huge threat. You have to kill this or you will die to it pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do kill it, you are getting inherently 2 for 1.
Yep.
This all adds up at a common. This all added up to me in my head as like, well, obviously this is solid. It's 7 mana. You can't have too many of those, so it's not a B.
Sure.
But it's a C+. Like, I just like, this is a card you're happy to have in your deck, and you're actually pretty happy to have it. LSV gives it a D. Now, here is where I want to emphasize, LSV I think is completely right here, and this is where he is a genius at being able to, and Marshall too, don't want to undersell Marshall, at being able to think about how this plays in the context of the set. LSV points out, because of Foretell as a mechanic, you as a player are not going to be looking for a lot of 7-drops that don't have Foretell. Because you'll be able to play those big spells faster with Foretell.
Sure.
So it's actually, the fact that Foretell cards, expensive Foretell cards exist, means that expensive cards without Foretell get worse.
That's fair. I see that. It's an efficiency thing at that point.
Yep. It's interesting, because like the very next card I'll just touch on for just a second is just a 4-mana, 4/4, can't block alone, Craven Hulk.
Sure.
It's just a 4-mana, 4/4. They gave that a C+. They're like, that's way better than Cinderheart Giant, which just shows, like, I think, one, this is a more aggressive format.
Yeah. And
your middle game 3/4 drop plays are going to be much more important than those 7-drop plays. That was a good lesson for me.
Yeah, I'm mulling through that right now. I do like that lesson. That's something I'll have to look into as well, because I agree with every point that you had. I thought, well, a big dumb creature that's 7/6 is going to apply a lot of pressure on the board. It's really going to hurt when it leaves. I thought, well, that's if you're ever like really hurting for a finisher, that's maybe that's not the finisher that you wanted. Go
right.
With the Dark Knights. Maybe not the finisher you wanted, but it's the one you deserved, or however it's said.
Right.
But yeah, I really didn't have a problem with that. But yeah, I get what they're saying. Like the efficiency that we're getting into cards, and maybe that is we're kind of getting to veteran status. I'm trying to say that we're old.
Yeah, we're
Magic.
decrepit.
Like if we saw...
We're dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly. If we saw Cinderheart Giant...
Oh my god.
like 5 years ago, 6 years ago even.
The chub we would have popped.
Oh my god. We would have just put at common too. Like that probably would have been rare.
I got rigid when I first started playing. I got rigid for Enormous Baloth, which is just a 7-mana 7/7. That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this just makes that look like an absolute joke.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Also, I think it was a 7-mana uncommon 7/7, and this is a common 7-mana 7/6 trample.
Yeah.
That gives you a card when it dies. Like.
Yeah.
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 It's pretty kooky.
Inflation is real. That's for sure.
It is. Okay. Do you have any other cards you want to talk about?
I do. I have one other card.
Okay.
This was, I won't say a swing and a miss from. Well, it essentially was. All right. It's
a foul ball.
Miss. Yeah. A foul. Yeah. Yeah. It's a foul ball on a 0-2 pitch. Squash.
Oh, okay.
I gave this one a C-. Everybody else gave this a build around B+.
Me included. Pat myself on the back for that one.
Yes. So, Squash is an instant for 4 and a red, and the spell costs 3 less to cast if you control a giant. And that right there, I assume, qualified you qualified the card as a build around. And I was doing some of these cards at like 2 in the morning. I was tired. This is probably one of those that just slipped through the cracks.
Yep.
I probably would have
had some of those.
Yep, I probably would have put this as a build around looking back, but that's neither here nor there. Squash deals 6 damage to target creature or planeswalker. It's a lot.
So if you got the giant, this is 1 in a red, deal 6.
Yeah.
To a creature.
Yeah. And I did the monocolors before the multicolors, which is another mistake and a lesson learned for me. And again, we will go over the multicolors here soon, but this one really plays into another card in there that would just make this thing just a chef's kiss at that point.
Just amazing.
Yeah. So this was a miss for me and a lesson learned. So I think this one is a good card in retrospect. I probably would have done maybe not a build around B+, but I would have done probably a build around B at that point. Just because I hesitate to give commons that high of a rating.
Sure.
And that's more just from like the analytics standpoint. Is the only reason why I hesitate to do that. So, good job. I'll give you kudos on that one. That was my miss on that one. But yeah, squash is good. I think
one other real quick note on that card too, what I think makes it good, and they mentioned it on the show as well. Your fail case, this is a 5 mana kill anything basically, which is not that bad.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
You'd happily play that without any possibility of making it better.
Agreed.
All right, cool. Okay, I think I'm ready to go on. I don't have much to say in red.
Okay, let's move on to green then.
Okay, you have one right off the bat, so why don't you take it away?
Boy, do I.
Boy, do we.
Boy, do we, yes. The card is Arachniform.
This is the very first card in green, and it was just a punch in the teeth for both of us.
It really was. It was definitely a welcome to green kind of card. So Arachniform is 1 and a green. It's an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, has reach, and is every creature type. So essentially has changeling.
Yep.
So changeling is a mechanic, considered a mechanic here in this. So okay, great. That's good. 2/2. This adds +2/+2 and gives reach. Things that I really like about that. The evasion of flying has always been kind of my Achilles heel as I play as a player. So I really appreciate and like reach. I gave this a C. Ken, you also gave this a C.
I did.
LSV did not give this a C. He just straight up gave it an F.
Yeah. Again, unplayable.
Yeah, unplayable. And I don't know. I'm in shock about this. And what are your thoughts on this one?
So my reasons for giving it a C, which look, I'm not saying it's amazing. I say it's just regular playable. 2 mana for +2/+2 on an aura is pretty good. And in fact, in white, there's an aura that gives +2/+2 for 2 mana that they gave a better grade to. So that was my first thing. Second, like you said, reach. Green can have trouble with flyers. It's good to have reach on something. Slap this on pretty much anything, and it's going to stop any flyer. And changeling, I was like, I overvalued. I'll admit this part. I overvalued the tribal aspect of this set. It's really not. It's really not a tribal set at all. There's a few things here and there, like the giants, but I walked into this with the thought that this is a tribal set, and it's just not. So I think that's also part of why I overvalued it. LSV's reasoning. Do you want to take a guess as to the reasoning here, or are you just like, I have no idea?
I don't. I really don't know on this one.
His reasoning, and I can kind of buy this, +2/+2 on an aura is better in white than green, because green already has big creatures. Like, if you have a 5/5, do you really need to make it a 7/7?
That's fair. Yeah.
Whereas in white, you've got your stupid little 1/2 flying first strike that you slap a 2/2 on. Mm-hmm. Now you're feeling okay.
So it's just a win more, essentially, at that point.
I guess. I do think that you and I overvalued it.
Yeah, I agree.
I do think it's kind of... I think it's hyperbole to call it an F.
Yeah.
And I would just say, this is a point I want to make. I don't think, again, I guess I already made this point. I don't think LSV and Marshall really differentiate between Ds and Fs.
Sure.
They basically, like, they're the same category. They're like, you really shouldn't be playing this too much. Mm-hmm. Which, again, that's fine. And I, as a teacher, follow that philosophy, too. There's really not that much of a difference in my mind when I'm grading student papers between this is a D and this is an F. It's bad. You shouldn't be satisfied with your work. That's what it means.
Sure.
So, I get it, but, yeah, this feels a little hyperbolic, I would say.
That's fair.
Okay. Let's see. Do I want to talk about this one? Yeah, I guess so. Let's talk about Finn the Fang Bear.
Okay.
This will be a real quick hit for me.
Sure.
Finn the Fang Bear, a legendary creature, a human warrior, 1 and a green for a 1/3 death touch. The text box on this guy is hilarious. Whenever a creature you control with death touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. And then, of course, when a player has 10 or more poison counters, they lose. They brought that mechanic back, and this is the only card that has it in the set.
I looked at this again. This was one of my 2:00 in the morning cards, and I was like, "Am I even seeing this card right? It's like, do I need to go to bed?" It's like, where did this come from?
Maybe I got poisoned.
Yeah, I must have I must be up to 5 or 6 poison counters at this point. I'm not even seeing it right. Yeah, this just came from nowhere.
Did our little game cause you to perspire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to change my shirt on that one.
You and I gave it a C+.
Mm-hmm.
LSV gave it a B. Now, we're not that far off. I guess we are. We gave it a completely different grade category.
Sure.
Marshall gave it a lower grade. I think he gave it a C+ or something.
Okay.
But LSV gave it a B. And if you listen to the audio, he just instantly and enthusiastically slaps. He's like, it's a 1/3 death touch. I'd give it a B. Because obviously the poison text doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
Did you think that when you read it? You're like, who cares about poison?
I had to look. I got into Scryfall and
to see if there's any other.
Looked up, Kaldheim and Death Touch, just to see if there was anything else.
There's not that much.
No. There's not hardly any support that you should rely on in this set. This is one of those. It's just they had to put something in here, and that this is meant for other formats, and that's understandable. That's not everything's going to be meant for limited.
Sure.
But yeah, this one just kind of came out of left field and caught me by surprise for sure.
Right. So the poison text doesn't mean anything. So we're all looking at this as a 1/3 death touch for 2, and LSV gives it the same grade he would give premium removal, which I am blown away by. I agree, it's good.
Sure.
I would play this in any green deck, but I wouldn't open this card and be like, ooh, Finn the Fang Bear, 1/3 death touch. And that's what a B means to me. It means I would open it and be like, ooh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This one was puzzling to me for sure. I'd be interested to hear more of LSV's thoughts. Unfortunately, that'll have to wait till we get him on the show.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, next card for you.
Okay, next card for me, and this one is fascinating because there is a wide range of grades on this one.
Yeah.
Very wide range. And I'll admit, this is a fluke in my methodology because of how past data went, so I did not stray too far from it. I, as a person, didn't really care for this card. So Path to the World Tree, it's a lot of text. So it is 1 and a green enchantment, and it's a novel. When this enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So that's just a small aside. That's essentially what I was grading on, because this next part here is not happening. Okay, so 2 in Wooburg, sacrifice this card. You gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, target opponent loses 2 life. Path of the World Tree deals 2 damage to up to 1 target creature, and you get a 2/2 green bear creature token. So you get a little something from each of the colors and whatnot.
Right.
It's not happening. Don't even worry about it. Just rip that part of the card off if you have to.
Cover it up, yeah.
Yeah, just don't even worry about it. We're looking at the very first part.
So 2 mana, search for a basic land, put it in your hand.
Yeah, and it's fine. It's ramp. I gave it a C+, and in retrospect, I probably would have gone down to a C realistically when I was doing that, and even still at the C to C- range. LSV gave this a D. Kenny gave it an F. That's just unplayable.
Yep. I would say if you put this in your deck, you are hurting your chances of winning.
I get it. I really do. That's I would have rather have seen. I would have rather have seen something like Pioneer Elves, It costs a little bit more, does the same thing, and it's on a body that can actually block or something like that.
That would be cool.
An enchantment that can't really interact beyond just grabbing this basic land. And if you're playing this on turn 2, yeah, I agree. That's just not something that I'd ever be excited about.
Or if this put the land on the battlefield, all of a sudden I'm on board.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
The problem I have, and the reason I gave this an F, is that you're paying 2 mana to get a land in your hand. At which point, just put a land in your deck instead of Path to the World Tree, so you don't waste a turn and mana going to get a land.
Agreed.
So that's why I got an F for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like you said, the rest of the text doesn't matter. They were geeking out there. Like, at some point on like my 83rd draft of this set, I'm going to try to make it happen. And yeah, I think it's a really fun build around. Super narrow, not a good idea, but for the people who have slogged through 100 drafts, that's really fun.
Sure.
So yeah, there was a wide range of grades that we gave it. Again, I have to just shake my head at what's the difference for LSV and Marshall between a D and an F. LSV said this is a D, as in you'll play it sometimes and you'll be a little unhappy to play it. I can't fathom the situation where I was like, yeah, I would put this in my deck. And for what it's worth, Marshall gave it an F, you know?
Okay. That's fair. The only thing that I can think of, and I'm not trying to apologize for this card, but it is a little bit of fixing. If you're really hurting and you have like 3 colors, maybe,
I suppose.
Maybe. I know. Like I said, I'm not trying to be a Path of the World Tree apologist, but that's
something that it does for you.
It is, yeah.
Again, same caveat as usual. Exactly. For LSV and Marshall's perspective, DNF is kind of the same thing, and you know they're giving these grades for a different purpose than we are. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that card up.
Yeah,
that was
an interesting one.
It's a big bugbear for me in this set. I will mention it again at a later point in this review.
Okay, very good.
Okay, next one I want to talk about, Mammoth Growth.
Okay.
This is a quick hit. Quick comments on this one. Mammoth Growth, 2 and a green, instant. Target creature gets +4/+4. It has Foretell for a green. So you pay 2 early on, and at some point you get a super giant growth, +4/+4. They gave it a D. You gave it a D+. Kudos to you. Well done. Well spotted. I gave it a C+. And the only comment I want to make here is I just really this is a critique of me. I feel like I have a really bad sense of combat tricks. What makes them acceptable and what makes them unacceptable.
Sure.
Because it seems like sometimes listening to LSV and Marshall, they'll say, this lets you win any combat, you know, which is what we're looking for in a good combat trick. And to me, this does the job, you know?
Sure.
You get +4/+4, that's going to win pretty much anything.
Sure.
And that will give them a C sometimes. And in this one, I remember listening to them talk about it, and I was like, I nailed it. They're like really being positive. They said a lot of good things about it, and they're like, yeah, I would give it a D at the end of the day. And I was like, what?
Interesting.
But you talked to me just for a second. What sent this to D+ territory for you? Because you had the right idea.
This is truly and purely the process here. I trusted it.
See? That's smart in this case.
Because, just past history.
They just don't grade
They don't
tricks.
like it. They just don't like it. So
look, I understand that. I just picked that up through osmosis that they don't generally like combat tricks, and they're just outright will tell you that as well because you're opening yourself up to getting 2 for 1. That's the big problem. With combat tricks.
That's fair. Yeah.
But sometimes combat tricks get C's for them, and sometimes they get D's and F's. Often they get D's and F's. And I personally don't have a good idea about what determines one or the other.
Sure.
Like the white combat trick that gave +1/+1 and double strike, they gave that a fine grade too. And this is pretty similar to me, but it doesn't hit that level.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay.
Last one I want to talk about in green. Again, real quick hit here. Serulf's Packmate.
Okay.
3 and a green, 3/3 wolf. When it ETBs, draw a card, and it has Foretell 1 and a green. We both missed the boat on this one.
We did.
You gave it a C, I gave it a C+, they gave it a B. And the note I made is this is another entry in the I can't tell you what I was smoking when I assigned this grade category. Ignore the foretell, right? Pretend foretell doesn't exist. 4 mana 3/3 draw a card is pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
Like Elvish Visionary is pretty good, and this is, I think, better than that because it's a bigger body.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can divvy up the cost on it. It helps you double spell. I don't know why I thought this wasn't great.
Yeah, this must have been another
Late
2
night.
in the morning. Yeah. Because,
Yeah.
now that I'm looking, I'm like, this is a B. Like, this is, like, in the B range.
Yeah, I would play a deck full of these things.
Yeah, I would too. Now. Well,
No,
oops.
I don't. Yeah, don't have anything special to say. I just
Sure.
that was one where, yeah, after they said the grade and I saw I missed it by that much, I reread the card and I was like, what? Why did I think this was okay?
Yeah. It's probably one of those, and like there's fallacies of the brain and whatnot, like the hot hand fallacy and whatnot.
Right.
Had you say, I don't know, you looked at a slew of like D's and F's right before that, like 3 of them beforehand,
Right.
and you're like, oh, this is good. Let me give it a C instead of like, thinking,
Instead of
oh,
an
that's
F.
yeah, and you're thinking, wow,
Or-
I'm
or
being
maybe-
generous here.
Or maybe vice versa. Maybe I would like look at a bunch of bad cards and see this and be like, wow, this is so much better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
so
You're right.
there's a whole
It's just-
bunch of stuff.
It's just an interesting little insight into our brains.
Very much so.
Okay, at last we can get to the multicolor cards.
Okay.
Which there's interesting stuff to talk about here.
Oh man.
I know you wanted to talk about this. Let's hear what you have to say. Ooh, I know what you want to talk about.
Yeah, there's. This is where I have a flaw in my method. Because, like I said, multicolor uncommons usually get ranked pretty high until you come up with cards like Forging the Tyrite Sword.
Indeed. So what does that do?
So Forging the Tyrite Sword is 1 a red and a white. It's a saga. It's an enchantment saga. Just for everybody's informational purposes, as a saga enters and after your draw step, you add a lore counter and then you sacrifice it after the 3rd counter.
The
So
final step, whatever that is.
After the final step, correct. So for the 1st and 2nd step, you create a treasure token. And in the 3rd step, you search your library for a card named Halvar, God of Battle, or an equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. Me as a person, I hate this card. I would have given it like a D. I didn't like it, but I tried to trust the process and it said B minus. So I said, okay, process, let's give it the B minus. Well, that kind of backfired on me because I gave it the B minus. Kenny gave it an F, and so did LSV. So I should have trusted my gut. I should have overridden the system and just kind of gave it the F on that one. So this was just a swing and a miss on this one, and I understand that that's going to happen every now and then. And then as we get more data into kind of my process and my database, these kinds of things will start fleshing out a little bit more. So this is purely one of those things. This is purely one of those cases where I simply don't have enough data to really give a good forecast of what these cards are actually going to do. So
I feel like John Henry right now. Like eventually it's going to be me against your machine.
essentially, yeah, essentially. So it's interesting because I really like how we're going about this. You were much more intimate with Magic at this point in time in life and all that stuff. I've kind of taken a little bit of a backseat because I have some other stuff in my life that I'm trying to focus on and whatnot.
Sure.
But again, I'm a data analyst, so I'm trying to take that data analyst approach to see, and this actually it's kind of cool to see just if LSV does have some patterns, some biases like inherent in his grading scales and whatnot. So it's kind of fun just to see how this works. We take different approaches, so it's fun to see that uniqueness.
I will say on this card, you were like, you said I got the right call, which I did in the end. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, I was sweating absolute bullets when they were talking about this card. Because remember, when they did it, multicolor came last. Now, I graded this card, and I gave it an F, and I felt very good about it. I was like, 3 mana, it makes 2 treasure tokens, whatever, and then you get an equipment. I was like, I don't like the equipment in this set. But then as I was listening to all of their evaluations of the equipment leading up to it, I was like, wow, they really like the equipment in this set. Maybe this is going to be like a build around B or some shit. And then they dropped an F on it, and I was like, yeah! Yeah!
Yeah.
It was the most triumphant moment in
Sure.
the whole thing for me.
Sure. Yeah. That was a good pick.
Let's talk about a bad pick I did.
Okay.
Let's talk about Fall of the Imposter.
Okay.
Fall of the Imposter is 1 green-white for another saga. First and second chapter, you put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. Chapter 3, final chapter, exile a creature with the greatest power among creatures target opponent controls. I gave this a B+. I thought this was top of the pop, really good uncommon.
Okay.
You gave it a C. Actual grade from LSV, C+. A good playable, but nothing to write home about.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, on first blush, I was pretty shocked at the grade that they gave. This is 3 mana to kill their best thing. Granted, in a couple of turns. Doesn't do it right away. But 3 mana kills their best thing, and leaves you behind with 2/2 in stats on the board, above and beyond.
Sure.
That seems just really good to me. Now, their logic that they provided is that when you need to kill something, this is not 3 mana kill something. This is 3 mana in 2 turns. You'll kill something.
Yeah.
Which, granted, this isn't going to pull you back from behind. But that's not what the B category is. That's the A category, is good from behind or ahead. This is obviously great from ahead. If you're already winning on board and you slap this down, and you're getting 2 +1/+1 counters this turn and next turn, and then they're just watching the clock tick down before their best creature dies, obviously this is good ahead.
Yeah.
It's not great from behind, but if you can survive a few turns, this will pull you back.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said.
You talk to me. Talk to me about why you gave this a C.
For me, that is something that, surprisingly, I actually had a similar thought to LSV, that it's not a just killed now, and typically whenever you're really hurting, you're kind of on your back foot and trying to either defend, or you're letting that damage kind of soak in.
Yeah.
And now you're really in a place where you're hurting at this point. And for the first 2 turns, or for the first 2 saga counters, 2 total power toughness just does not strike me as enough. And I understand that it is 1 a green and a white, so I would not expect this to say put 2 +1/+1 counters for each lore counter.
Of course.
But I just think it just doesn't do enough for me. I would rather see this card be 2 a green and a white and do something a little bit more powerful, and something a little bit more like now.
Right.
So I think to me this one, like, it's fine, but it's muted, especially for like an uncommon multicolor. So that's why I was a little bit lower on it. I still think it's a fine card, and would I play it? Hell yeah, I'd play it.
And obviously LSV does too. C+ is like you're very happy to play this card.
Yeah, I'd play it, but it's not like I'm actively seeking it out or anything. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna start going into green and white because I have this card. I'm not doing that.
And I think where I messed up is B+ to me should be that's first pickable. I don't think this is a great first pick, probably.
Sure.
So I think that's where I messed up on this one.
Sure, that's fair.
All right. Do you have any other multicolors you would like to discuss?
Okay, one that I just straight up missed, and we were in very similar camps with this one, and we clearly were not in the same camp as LSV. And that card is the Trickster God's Heist.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to put this out here. I think this is more because of our early days. And the reason I say that is because you in high school, like
I know where this
a long time ago, built this monstrosity deck that none of us could ever beat. It was this blue deck that just stole everything. So, I know your thought process was, well, let me just take your cards and just beat you with them.
Yep.
And I have PTSD looking at this card about that stupid ass deck. So I know how good it is to steal other people's stuff and just beat their faces with it.
Mhm.
And this one here, it's in addition to exchanging. Okay, let me talk about this one. Let me read through it first. So the Trickster God's Heist. It's an enchantment saga. It's 2, a blue, and a black. For the first lore counter, you may exchange control of 2 target creatures. That's good. I like that.
Yep.
Second one, I like even more. I think it's great. You may exchange control of 2 target non-basic non-creature permanents that share a card type. So you can exchange planeswalkers. If you have one that's about ready to die or something like that, it just has 1 more counter. You got somebody over there with 7-8 loyalty. Let's take it. I love that. And then on the third one, target player loses 3 life, you gain 3 life. That I don't really care about. It's these first 2 I think are awesome.
But even so, as far as icing on the cake,
it's
draining
not nothing.
3 is pretty nice.
That's a 6-point swing in total.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing to scoff at, but like to me, I love those first 2 lore counters. Like I said B+, you said B, LSV gave this a D+. To me, if I'm seeing this card, I'm picking up this card, and I'm thinking, blue-black's probably where it's at for me. I truly feel that way. No disrespect to LSV or anything like that, but I'm staying put in my decision on this one. I think this goes more towards my playstyle, or just knowing and having the history of how powerful that stealing other people's stuff can be.
Yep. You said you graded it so highly because of PTSD. I graded it so highly because of whatever the opposite of PTSD is, where I get aroused looking
Euphoria.
at this card. Yeah, I feel frenzy and hysteria looking at this card for the exact same reason. Like, Switcheroo is not that good of a card. That's 5 mana for basically just phase 1 of this. This is just a cheaper Switcheroo, so that's already pretty nice. But then the fact that you get like so much more on top of it, I think it's pretty good. Now, to be fair, we did grade it much higher than LSV did. LSV and Marshall expressed a fair amount of uncertainty about this card.
Okay.
They were inclined to grade it low just because Switcheroo style effects tend to not be very good and limited. But they called this a weirdo card. They said it's just hard to evaluate. So time may prove that we are in fact right on this one.
Okay.
But we'll have to see.
That's fair.
Let's see. For me, last multicolor card. Narfi, Betrayer King.
Okay.
This is one we both did a good job. We gave it a B. LSV gave it a B+. This is 3 blue-black for a 4/3. It's a legendary snow creature, a zombie wizard. It says other snow and zombie creatures you control get +1/+1. And for snow, you can return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Obviously, a 4/3 for 5. Ignore the Lord ability.
Sure.
Ignore the +1. A 5 mana 4/3 that you can recur for 3 mana is broken.
Yeah.
That's just really good.
That's great. It's
very hard to get snow.
Yes, it is.
You need to be a heavy snow deck to make this work.
Yep.
We nailed it. This is good. They really emphasized in the podcast how hard it is to hit snow, which again just makes me think the set is kind of baiting me a little bit. It's making me think I can do that reliably on this uncommon. When in fact, when you pop off on a Narfi Betrayer King style deck, it's because you just got the sicko, disgusting snow deck.
Sure.
But anyway, pat on the back for us.
Yeah.
And snow is hard to get.
Yes.
Any others for you?
I don't believe so on this one. I just think overall, what's really difficult is we also try to build around cards and whatnot. And for me, I went very heavy on the build around. So build around is not really something just in my play style. I generally try and find the best card of the pack. at the time, at a given time, and I go more for efficiency.
Sure.
So having like a build around card is a bit of a foreign concept to me. Like it's not unheard of, and I've done that plenty in like cubes and everything.
Definitely
like that.
in a cube, yeah.
But whenever I approach a set release, I'm thinking, okay, let's just be efficient. If I can have just a marginally like above average cohesive deck, I think I'm going to do better than those that are trying to go for like that home run shot.
Yeah.
And I would rather, the saying goes, better be lucky than good. I'd rather be good because I think in the long run, I think I'm going to come out ahead. So that's typically how I do that. So that's been a challenge for me, and I really appreciate that it's like straining my brain to try and figure these things out. So whenever I was trying to come up with the build-arounds, I had 10 build-arounds in multicolor. LSV had 4. So
right.
this is a strain for me. I went overboard with it, and I thought there were a lot of things that, with the multicolor and whatnot, those are kinds of things that you kind of do need to build around because they are kind of the glue that puts it all together. So I went a little heavy on the build arounds, whereas LSV just didn't, and that's fine. That to me, that is a learning opportunity to understand. Okay, how does this process work? So that was one thing that I really took away from this, and I'm very appreciative of whenever we were putting these together.
I think it's very apt, something you said in there. You were hearkening to Cube, and you were basically saying that the super build-around cards, on average, are not going to be as good as just, playing it by the books, by the numbers, right? I agree. It reminds me in Cube, like Vintage Cube, Storm decks are usually not very good, but the best Storm decks are just the straight-up best decks you can build in the Cube.
For sure.
It's like their top end just goes over the top of everything, but on average they're kind of junk.
Yeah, and it's chasing that high, right?
Oh yeah.
There is nothing, and I'm not a huge Storm fan. Like I'll see people just crash and burn with it, and I've even tried to play it. I kind of bought into the hysteria, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm swearing
not
it off.
For me.
But I can appreciate a good Storm deck. Like if someone can get that together, draft the right parts, and can overcome any kinds of issues that are either on the board state or what have you, I can appreciate that, and I think it's really damn impressive to be able to see that. So I get it, but I would rather go for more of the sure thing than just that potential at a home run.
Yep. Okay, so we are in the home stretch, Seth. Let's cruise through artifacts and lands real quick.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, I see that you have Colossal Plow flagged as a card you want to talk about, and I do too.
It's a funny card.
Yeah.
I mean, the name's funny. It got points for that. But beyond that, yeah, it's a thing. Now, let me read the card. So, Colossal Plow is 2 colorless for an artifact vehicle. It's an uncommon. The vehicle itself is 6/3, so it's powerful.
Pretty hefty.
Yeah. Whenever Colossal Plow attacks, add white, and you gain 3 life. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases in. So, when you're attacking with it, it doesn't...
This is some exciting shit.
Yeah.
Two to cast, a 6/3 that gives you 3 mana and 3 life when it attacks.
Mm-hmm.
But...
You got another part here. It's Crew 6. Crew 6. So you have to tap any number of creatures you control with a total power of 6 or more and then that vehicle becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. Crew 6. So instantly, and we didn't talk about this card, but it naturally goes with...
Giant Ox.
Yes, it goes with an Ox.
Which is 1 and a white for an 0/6 that can crew things based on its toughness rather than its power.
Mm-hmm. And it's an 0/6, which is perfect.
Which is very, very cute. The Ox pulls the plow. Makes sense.
Exactly. But that's where the cuteness really ends. I called this a C. You called this a C minus. LSV straight up called this one an F. And I tell you what, it's more because I was too scared to give this an F. That's truly what it was. I was trying to trust the process on this one.
That was the exact comment I wrote.
Is it really? No.
I'll just read you the comment verbatim as I wrote it. My comment I wrote: I had all the right thoughts on this, but didn't have the balls to follow through and flunk it.
That's so funny. That is so funny. Yeah, it's one of those things where it was a trust the process. I didn't like it. I knew Cruise 6. That's tough. Like, I understand.
If you're crewing for 6, why aren't you just attacking with your creatures?
No kidding. Like, maybe, I don't know. I don't even think it's a viable strategy, but maybe in a go wide strategy. Like, it's not elves. Because, we've already talked about elves. I thought, well, you've got all these, like, the card that you had talked about. It was just such a tease that gave you 2 elf creature tokens.
The Raised Dead, or the Zombify, rather.
Exactly. So you're like, okay, so say you saw that card, the Zombify with the elves, and then you got a Colossal Plow after that. In my mind, if I'm seeing those cards, pack 1, pick 1, and pack 1, pick 2. I'm not saying I pick those cards, but if you see those in those packs, you're like, huh, what if I did a go wide strategy and got some elves? Maybe, and I know nothing about this set. Okay, all right, there's elves in here. Maybe there's some mana dorks in there that could maybe ramp me up to that or whatnot. Anyways, you can have a go wide strategy with elves. Well, you would be absolutely screwed in a situation like that. I don't think there's any viable way for Colossal Plow to work and not work well. You can make it work, of course. Like,
you can swing with it.
Oh, sure. And
lose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I feel so bad for new players coming in and seeing Colossal Plow and then seeing Giant Ox and being like, this is the combo.
This is it, yeah.
Obviously. And it is. It's supposed to make you think that it's a combo. The Ox pulls the Plow. This has 6 toughness and can crew things based on its toughness. This needs crew 6.
Yep.
It's like chocolate and peanut butter. This is so... And it's so fucking bad.
But the problem is you didn't look at the expiration date of that chocolate and peanut butter. It expired 10 years ago.
It's awful.
Yeah.
They gave this 3 toughness. This is so harsh.
What a joke.
It's not even going to live through combat.
Yeah.
By the time you can crew 6, you don't even care about the 3 mana.
No.
It's just really bad. I thought about all these things when I was looking at this card, and I was like, it's grudgingly playable.
Sure.
No, it's not. It's horrible. Okay.
Oh.
I think we've said enough about Colossal Plow. I think it's very cute. I think it's a damn shame they wasted this cool interaction on such a bad thing that's just going to bait people.
I agree. Absolutely agree.
Okay. So that was your sort of soapbox.
Yep.
Are you ready for mine?
Yep.
Ooh, you're actually on this soapbox with me. You're even higher up on this soapbox.
Yep.
Replicating Ring. Okay.
I like
Replicating Ring. The grades. Let's just do the grades first. I gave it a C minus.
Sure.
You gave it a B minus. LSV gave it an F. This card is 3 colorless for a snow artifact. So it's snow. Tap, get a mana of any color. So this is a snow manolith.
Yep.
But on top of that, there's a bunch of text that doesn't matter at all, but I'll read it anyway. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a night counter on it. Then if it has 8 or more night counters, remove all of them, and you get 8 copies called Replicated Ring that say tap for any color. Now, so this is, if you play this on turn 3, you're going to wait till turn 11 to pop this, and then you'll go from 11 to 19 mana. It's obviously that's not why you're doing it.
You're doing something wrong at that point. If you're waiting on that, you're doing something wrong.
Very much like Path to the World Tree, cover up that second line of text. If you want the real limited text here, it's 3 colorless mana for a snow artifact that gives you 1 mana of any color. Now, I say this is fine. You can play this. If you're ramping to something, 3 mana, it's snow, so it gives you snow mana. It counts for snow stuff. fine. Do you want to talk about why you gave it a B minus?
Well, it's because of the snow, and we've talked about this throughout. Snow is hard. It's hard to do, and I overvalued snow as well. I fell into that trap too, which is why I gave it a B minus. I figured that this is another snow permanent. It's going to count towards your critical mass of snow, and I thought this is good fixing. I thought this would be if you're going snow, or if you see this early, you're like, there we go. Okay, let's go. So to me, I thought that qualified it for the B category. I don't want to give it a B. I was like, I think it's,
it sounds like for you it's kind of build around-ish.
I think so.
Not really build around-ish, but like you would put this in a build around snow deck.
I think I would have to have other snow things, and then for me to see a replicating ring, that's confirmation for me that I'm going down the right path.
Right.
That's probably how I would put it.
Right. Yeah, and then LSV says this is an F, unplayable in all situations. I think this is a crime.
I would not give it an F. In all respect to LSV, he's played a lot more at a much higher level.
Absolutely.
So.
I think absolutely. And through all this, anytime we're talking about how we disagree, we're just sharing our opinions. Sure. We obviously know less than Hall of Fame Hall of Fame Magic player LSV.
Yep.
But I think we should still be honest about how we feel and if we have a differing opinion. And I think this one, it's definitely playable. Like,
I agree.
A 3-mana mana rock, it's not exciting, but it's fine.
No.
I don't think you'll be embarrassed to play that. I think a deck that wants to ramp and go big is happy to have this. Mm-hmm. And it's snow, and it makes snow. So I think all these things, at worst, this puts it somewhere in the C's, I think. Mm-hmm. To say that this is an F, I think, is pretty wild. This is a case where I think that they looked at those ridiculous extra lines of text, and they let that influence them to be like, this is stupid. Don't do this.
Sure.
And not look at where you might play this card.
Mm-hmm.
And still on my soapbox here, you compare this card to Path to the World Tree, this just seems clearly better, right?
Absolutely.
A 3-mana snow artifact that gives you snow mana compared to a 2-mana do nothing. Like, I don't know how they give that a D and this an F. That seems completely backwards to me.
Yeah, I have trouble with that too. I actually had to look at my Path of the World Tree at my grade. I'm so glad that I gave this one a higher grade because I gave Path of the World Tree a C+.
Right.
And I gave this one a B-. So
at the very least, you're evaluating this as better than Path.
I do. I do feel this is better. Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough of us ranting. What's another card you want to talk about here?
I'm going to move on to lands at this point. In lands, I had so much trouble with. And I was putting this together at the 11th hour. I was like really just ready to be done at that point. Like, I'm not kidding. I probably spent 15 hours like working on this. I added a lot of extra stuff. That was on me. I understand. But at some point, you get a little bit tired of it.
A little bit.
At this point, the last stuff was the lands. I didn't really have much data, so I said C+ to all.
I mean, it is kind of what they tend to give non-basic lands.
It seemed pretty safe, honestly. That's why I gave it just a C+ at that point. So it seemed like a safe bet. Now, like looking at these, I think our biggest difference between us, you and me, would be Great Hall of Starnheim. Mm-hmm. I gave that a C+, naturally. You gave this an A, and LSV gave this a B.
Yep. And what this card does is it's a land, enters tapped, adds a black, but for white, black, tap, you sack it, and a creature you control, and you get a 4/4 flying white angel warrior creature token, which you can do at sorcery speed.
Sure. Yeah, looking at it now, like coming back after decompressing and just enjoying this discussion and all that stuff, I look at this. Orsov, white and black, easily my favorite color combination. Absolutely. Like, and that actually goes back all the way to high school too. That was my favorite deck that I bought a starter deck whenever it was guild packed, and I had so much more fun with that starter deck than I had any previous deck and whatnot. So I just kind of kept that one up, and that's always just been near and dear to my heart. So A, this is in my colors that I really appreciate. And B, it's a 4/4 white Angel Warrior creature with flying and vigilance. That's good.
Right.
That's really good.
Yep.
At the drawback of losing the land, whatever. But it's 3 mana. And then losing this land, I don't think that's much of a sacrifice. I think to me,
and definitely, if you keep in mind that you're probably activating this late in the game when you don't care about losing the land.
Exactly. I think this is, not even like a stalled board state or anything like that. It doesn't even have to be that. Like, it's great for something like that. You can just, fly over and get this going. But this is a game ender. Like, 4 damage a turn, assuming they don't have any flyers or anything like that. That is a quick clock. So, especially for limited. So I love this card. If I were regrading this one, I'm probably going B plus. I like this card a lot.
Yep, I think it's really good. The opportunity cost is just so low that you really don't mind it. I will talk about one last land here.
Sure.
I'll talk about the Gates of Istfell. You gave it a C+, of course.
Okay.
I gave it a B+. They gave it an A-. So this is an A land for them. Gates of Istfell enters tapped, adds a white for 2 white, blue. Sacrifice it, and you gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. So 5 mana, gain 2, draw 2. And sacrifice it, obviously. I am not disagreeing with their grade at all. I think this is properly evaluated. But I just wanted to kind of point out, again, as a learning experience, usually they describe A's as the best of the best, the game winners, the bombs, good from ahead, good from behind. This doesn't really fall into those categories necessarily. I do still think it's an A, but I think this just points to the fact that there's another thing that could go into A's, which are things that are just so efficient or have such a small opportunity cost that the effect they give you, even though the effect itself, like gain 2, draw 2, is like, whatever. But the fact that it's on a land makes this just so high impact for so little investment overall. So that's just something for me to keep in mind. And this reminds me a lot of the flip lands from Zendikar Rising, where you have a land that when you draw it late, it's a spell. This is basically the same thing, and a good spell.
Yeah, I agree. Just a couple sides here. I really appreciate and like what Wizards is doing with their lands and trying to keep them relevant, because there is nothing more frustrating. And we both dabbled a little bit in competitive, kind of mid-career and whatnot.
Sure. Career, quote unquote.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. And there's nothing more infuriating than flooding out. Or, or I guess I'll bring that back just to say that your mana base, either whether it's flooding or you're just starved for mana, there's nothing more frustrating than just not being able to play the game. And I really appreciate that Wizards is really trying to make, and you can tell just in how they're, applying these cards, especially at the land level. I think that overall trends as we go, especially if this keeps up, I think we'll start seeing maybe fundamental changes in how we split our mana bases. So typically, at a very high level, a Magic deck is construed of about 35 to 40% lands. And I think if we keep having stuff like this, and if people want to try and push the envelope, or if they just feel less comfortable, I think this allows people to be able to say, okay, this is kind of a half spell, or this is kind of a half land, or whatever you want to look at it. So I think fundamentally, I think they are improving the game by keeping certain cards relevant throughout the entire game instead of just one portion of it. So kudos to Wizards on that one. I think, credit where credit is due. I think they're doing a great job with this. So,
yep. I think their 1-drops kind of fall in the same category. Where
I do
1-drops
too.
used to be okay if you played them turn 1 and then worthless after that, and now they stay relevant much longer.
Yeah, and I think Boast is doing that in Kaldheim. I don't think it's quite there yet.
But later in the game, even if your card's going to die, your creature's going to die, you can still get one last Boast in.
Exactly. So, and yeah, I agree. I think Boast is a really good test or method, whatever you want to call this, experiment to try and keep cards relevant throughout the entire game. Because you don't want to draw, like your 1 mana whatevers on, turn 8, turn 9, or whatever. This is like, I do not want to see this. Whether it's a cycle or, whatever mechanic that they come up with. I really think it's a good thing that they try and keep cards, or at least keep it in mind that they try and keep a card relevant throughout all phases of the game. So kudos to Wizards for really making an attempt to do that, especially with the lands. I can tell that they're really working at that. So that's cool.
For sure.
But real quick,
Yes.
What does Gates of Isfel, the 2 white, blue, gain 2 life, draw 2 cards. What card does that remind you of from an older set?
No. What are you thinking of?
To me, this
Are you thinking
screams
of,
a mini Sphinx's Rib.
Oh, okay, yeah. Then
Yeah.
that was...
That's how I look at this one, and I think that's why this one gets ranked so highly.
Yeah.
I don't have the data on how highly they ranked Sphinx's Rev,
That's
but
gotta
I
be
can
great.
I imagine so too. And this is essentially a 2-mana version of it.
Yeah, it's a mini version that's tacked onto a land that helped you cast your spells for the
exactly
early portions of the game.
In a blue-white, I'm projecting here, that you're probably in a control style deck. In a later game, this is going to be really helpful just to keep that card draw going. So I think everything about this, if I were to...
Or you're in a
redraft-
Flyers deck where you're just trying to punch through the last points of damage, or
Exactly.
you're in a go wide trying to punch through the last points. This is good in all those
Yep.
situations.
So yeah, again, I just did a blanket C+. If I were to redraft, B+, A- easily. Yeah, I think this is a really good card.
Well, right on. Those were the cards that are worth noting, and that we had things that we wanted to say and to share about how we did, what we learned. But now I think we are ready for the verdict on who won this game.
Oh man, let's see it.
Seth's final score, 308.
0-8. I have literally no reference, so I can't be excited or anything.
That's
That sounds like a
insane.
big number though.
Kenny's final score. Oh, there's an error. This is so much tension. Kenny's final score, 268.
Wow.
Oh, I honestly had no idea who was going to win that.
Yeah.
No clue at all.
So I was 40 points off overall. Okay.
Yes. Oh, God, that was so nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, good game, man. I owe you a booster box.
Oh, man. Honestly, it's really good that I won that, because I like the narrative of your machine getting more and more advanced and chasing me. It would have been really anticlimactic if John Henry just got beat instantly, like out of the gate.
So, you know me, I'm frugal and I like to budget. And I budgeted for the year as best I could for 2021. And I came across. I knew that we were going to be doing this. So I asked myself, how much do I need to budget for this? And I planned on budgeting for 2. Saying we're doing 4 of them a year. I budgeted for 2. I kind of figured, yep, I'm gonna have a slow start, but yeah, I'll be catching up pretty quick.
Okay,
that's my plan.
I like you putting your money where your mouth is. You're like,
That's right.
I can lose 2. I ain't losing more than that.
That's right. Okay. Well,
So what do you think of this whole experience? Did you have a good time? Would you do this again?
absolutely. I think this was really informative, and it was really helpful for me to understand two aspects. We kind of talked about this a little bit more. It's like talking about build-arounds and just understanding, like, at what point you look at a card and say, okay, I need to more or less pivot or build or make my choices, my card choices with this card in mind. I don't typically do that, so that is a new way of thinking, and that's a part of progress and learning and making yourself just a better at whatever is trying to apply yourself in a different way and trying to gain perspective and all that. So I really appreciate that, and I'm really excited to try that out. Another thing too is now I have more data, and I can slice and dice however I need to, and understand if there's any kind of biases present or anything like that. So now I'm going to have 2 data sets that I can put together and start to look at the data in new ways and fun ways, hopefully, and learn more about it. So right now it was one of those things where, and we've mentioned this before, I was the pessimist, you were the optimist, and LSV was both and encompasses both on there, and that makes sense, just based on his experience and understanding kind of where the cards fall in the whole spectrum of things, and he can kind of take a more hands-off approach because he has so much more experience and knowledge about how these games work, and just a deeper level understanding of this game. That's truly it too, of among many other things. But overall,
to piggyback off that too, I would say a big thing for me was just learning to try to think bigger picture and think about the cards in context.
Yeah.
And to imagine them in my hand, how do they play out over the course of a game?
Mm-hmm.
That's something I missed out on a bunch of grades because I wasn't doing that.
Yeah, I get that. So, overall, a lot of fun. Sucks that I lost. I'll come back for the next one. But this is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity.
You bet your ass. Thanks everybody for listening. If you stuck through to the end, I would be, and I'm sure Seth would as well, we'd be very interested to know if you liked this episode, if you stuck through the end, maybe format changes. I think this is something that's going to be work in progress, trying to figure out exactly the format that we want with this.
Yeah.
So please do let us know. This has been Red Mage, Blue Mage. I'm Kenny. You can find me at Wolfmere on Twitter. You can find our podcast at RedBlueMTG on Twitter. Seth, do you want to drop your handle?
Sure. I can be found at CarterSA87, just about any social media platform, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Feel free to drop me a line. I'd love to have discussions with anybody. And this has been a lot of fun, and can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, Seth. This was
pleasure.
Really fun.
My pleasure.
All right. We'll catch you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.